Welcome everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of Travel Talks. Thank you for joining us both online and also here in person at the Business Travel Show in London Docklands on the Sunbourne Yacht Hotel, which is a lovely place to be. So thanks everyone for joining us, and particularly thank you to Mark from EasyJet for joining us. So today the topic is all about achieving a sustainable travel program, and really we'll sort of just spend the next half an hour or so unpacking that and talking through that. We'll also take some questions online and also in person in the audience during sort of towards the end of the session as well. So we hope you find this session really helpful. But I thought first of all be useful to understand who we are and really our positions and why we're here and why everyone's come to join us and talk to us, listen to us talk about sustainability. So Mark, do you perhaps just want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Ian, for inviting this opportunity to be here. So I work at EasyJet. I've been at EasyJet 8 years, working in the business team as business development manager. Yep. Started my career as cabin crew within EasyJet and moved my way through to the team. I've spent some time in the sustainability team during the COVID period, and now lead for corporate in sustainability.
Brilliant. Oh, it sounds a nice wide-ranging role.
Yes, there's a whole breadth of roles that I've done.
Yeah, it's not the same everywhere, I think.
No.
So those of you that don't know me, my name's Ian Currington. I'm Director of Account Management and Client Implementation at Gray Dawes. Been with the business probably for more years than I care to admit. But for those of you who've not met me before, good to meet you all, and thanks for joining us. And really, I think what was probably quite key for myself is I'm no expert in sustainability, but I'm regularly and along with the rest of the account management team and the rest of the guys in Gray Dawes talking to clients regularly about sustainability matters and how really to get the best out of the environmental program. So not an expert, not a scientist. We had this conversation before, didn't we? Neither of us are scientists.
We're not scientists, no.
So go a little easy on some of the questions, everyone. But really, just people that are very passionate about the topic and really want to work with our customers and work with our businesses to make a difference really for the future. So just thought it'd be good to a little agenda as well for some of the things we'll talk through. But really, if we just sort of have a little bit of a chat generally about sustainability. So from an opening sort of question is what does sustainability really mean to EasyJet?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost we acknowledge as an airline we have climate change, and we obviously emit carbon. And I think for us it's really two stages. So the first is to minimise carbon. That's the first thing that we need to do. And secondly, which obviously we'll go on to talk more later, but is really looking at zero carbon. Yep. So looking at those technologies, looking beyond. Yep. So initially minimising and really then looking at zero technology in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think really from a Gray Dawes perspective, we want to echo that in terms of working with our customers and our own business as well, really to work from the today, the tomorrow and the future. And really that's the topic of today as we sort of unpack some of these items. This is what we can do today, what's the here, what's coming very shortly, and what's very much coming in the future. So the topic title was ultimately achieving how to, as a business, to achieve a sustainable travel program. It's a complex topic, but I think as today demonstrates, we have to collaborate both with customers but also with suppliers along the way, and it is a constantly changing and evolving program, and some of the stuff that's sort of happening and perhaps if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago compared to today would be very different. So I think really from a sort of a short-term perspective, EasyJet's really gone on quite a sort of a cool journey, and sort of perhaps if you'd like to sort of talk us through some of those things that you're currently doing and how you got to this point really.
Yeah, no, sure. So I think initially for us it's all about minimising our carbon. So in the short term it's looking at the aircraft that we operate. So where we operate Airbus Neos for us as an airline is the kind of short term that 15% more fuel efficient, 50% lower on noise reduction. And then it's looking at lines of flying as well. So really as an airline, one of the simplest things on my side, and I guess to understand from the audience point of view, is that an airline is fuel based. Yeah. So less fuel we use, less carbon we emit. Yeah. It's a very simple process. So in the short term, it's aircraft. Also, it's then I mentioned about operational efficiencies. So this would include things like we were the first airline to champion the single engine taxing, which when sort of talking to corporates is a nice thing to be able to say. And of course, if you imagine we do 1,680 flights a day at the moment, so if you can do that with a number of aircraft, that will minimise fuel overall, which will minimise the impact of our carbon. There are other areas that we work with weather. We look at lines of flying, so we have upgraded data, our systems for our pilots. They're the main sort of two, what we do short term, reducing our carbon. The other point is back in November 2019, we announced that we would offset all the fuel used on every single flight. We were the world's first to do this, and again, another milestone and something that working for the airline is very proud of, which we continue to do over that period. So.
And I think you've had some great customer feedback and great client feedback to all of those changes and putting those sort of steps in place, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. So part of my role working in sustainability, which was during my time I'm in EasyJet, it was always looking beyond what I could do for my corporate customers. So, it was okay learning about sustainability, but I think, what I took away from that was, okay, well, what can I do for my role? So I'm in this great position that EasyJet offers, and then what can I do for mine? And it was then looking at carbon reporting. So I created a carbon certificate, which is verified data for our corporate customers, which then highlights for them not only the amount of carbon per month, but also there's a cost saving there. It was then also questioning within EasyJet, what could we do further for our corporates? So it was then putting together a monthly CO2 report, highlighting whether it would be route-based, whether it would be a whole list. I was initially told maybe this would be quite difficult, but I am a bit tenacious in my role, and then said, look, we need to do this.
Yeah.
We need that data. Our corporates are requesting it, and that's what we produce. So it's really to highlight what we were doing around the offsetting.
Yeah, and I think that's the same for lots of clients. So again, when we're talking to customers, is people is wants to have that need to be able to measure their carbon, to be able to understand what the impact of their travel program. And I guess for many people that is the starting point, and as we sort of talk through today, it's a case of going beyond just the starting point, but very much the starting point is that sort of measurement part. I think the standard that a lot of people work towards is the DEFRA calculations available online, sort of as part of different scopes within that. So we're sort of scope 3, which for some customers is quite a way down the list of importancy or the list of immediacy for their travel sort of reporting program. But again, increasingly what we're seeing is more and more clients setting baselines on their actual reporting. So first of all, once you're able to measure what your carbon output is, then actually to say, well, this is my starting point. So actually, if we want to do more than just report, and I actually want to make a change, and we'll sort of talk through some of those changes along the way, is then to start to set that baseline, set some targets. And again, talking to some customers recently, is people wanting to set sort of targets and put in case, this is what our target for. So if we can complete as much travel as we're doing at the moment, but to or perhaps even increase that, but to keep the carbon level the same, then putting that baseline in place, and then thinking about how they travel and how they travel
absolutely.
Ultimately.
And just to add to that, so we, part of my role is working with various corporates, and a lot of the discussion point is around the carbon budget.
Yeah.
This is what we're starting to hear. There are certain corporates who are implemented this as a metric. So, whereas historically it would be about cost, but now we're seeing this sort of wider discussion. And again, this is a challenge that I have now internally to now create the right data.
Yep.
So, we have this data behind us. We can look at historical. We can see point A to point B. Why can't we understand then the revenue, the actual CO2 per kilometre? So then we want to give that real data. So that's something which we are working with, so we can provide that data, so they have everything that they need. So in order to, I guess, make the right decision. Yeah,
I mean, it's quite interesting that I noticed that IATA have just introduced a new industry standardisation for reporting, which is sort of quite an interesting step forward. So IATA are the sort of industry body for airlines, and for them to sort of see that actually DEFRA works in the UK from a reporting perspective, but everyone reports to different kind of ways. So I think the industry is crying out for a bit of standardisation in terms of data and what that means. So that will be an interesting thing for everybody to be looking at really for into the future, and certainly something that the Gray Dawes are working on and working with key partners as well. So it's sort of a little bit beyond some of the data then. I think what's also important is beyond just the sort of the carbon sort of piece in the here and the now and the today, but you obviously spoken about the aircraft efficiencies, but also I know that we've sort of spoken about sort of the holistic sort of side of things, actually the whole total thing that the airline's operating, and some of the ways that not just the aircraft fuel burn, but some of the other things that you guys are doing.
Yeah, so this goes beyond carbon, which are, I guess, things that our customers would see, things like reducing plastics.
Yeah.
That's a big part, and obviously, as I mentioned, 1,600 flights a day. You minimise one aspect; it's all small gains, right? Small percentages. There's obviously a bigger gain. So we've reduced, from our in-flight operations to date, so end of 2021, we've reduced by 36 million single-use plastics on board. We don't use cutlery. So apologies if anyone out there travelling, please bring your own. So we don't use cutlery on board. We look at things like our in-flight sort of food and beverage. So, for example, that's delivered, whether it's in the UK or EU. So we try and restrict that to our suppliers. And I think, everyone should question that, right? The supply chain you should all have those questions. The one thing I'm really proud of, and having worked as crew, was hearing the announcement that we now produce uniforms, which are made from, let me get this right, 45 plastic bottles.
Wow.
So each uniform you'll see on board, they're now made of 45 plastic bottles. Still look good, obviously the white colours.
Washed beforehand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, rinsed and washed, as my wife loves to do at home. So very, I guess, what does that mean? Yeah, it's great that we're doing that, but ultimately it's something in the region of 2.5 million reduction of plastic bottles going into either landfill or oceans. And so these kind of steps that we're taking, and there are a number of others that we could talk to you about, but that's the main two that we have.
And I think this is sort of one of the important things we're sort of trying to get over today. Obviously, the title was very much around developing sustainable travel programs, but actually is to understand what suppliers are doing and partners. And certainly from a policy perspective, and we'll perhaps sort of just unpack that in a little bit further, but certainly from a policy perspective is understanding what your supply chain are doing, what your customer, what the key airlines are working with. And actually it's brilliant to talk, and one of the reasons why we were so keen to have this conversation with yourselves at EasyJet was there's so much going on at EasyJet in this particular space, to actually then be able to bring that into a travel policy, so that the travel policy looks at who are suppliers in that that we're working with, what are their efforts in order to not only look at fuel burn but also other areas of sustainability. And I think sort of a few of the sort of policy tips from a sort of a Gray Dawes perspective. Obviously we've spoken about some of the reporting sort of side of things, but actually very much measuring the types of trips that people are doing and what the return off the investment is for those particular trips. I mean, that goes without saying really for any travel program, is to make sure you understand why you're traveling and how you're traveling, but obviously then being able to bring in the environmental sort of elements to that. And talking to a customer, I think it was Friday this week, is that we actually were really unpacking their current travel program in terms of both who their key airline suppliers and who their key airline partners were, and putting those and making those forefront of their travel program, which of course can also be built into the booking tool. But to also think around some small little changes. Obviously, you probably don't want me to say this, but sort of modal shift is a great industry term, which is when we're travelling is the flight the right option?
Absolutely.
How, is it better to be going by train?
We acknowledge that, and I think I embrace it.
Yeah.
Talking to corporate customers, I say, look, what I want to make sure is that you have all the right information. Yeah. You go by train. You want to go by train. You want to go by the most sustainable option. We're in it. The phrase "in it together," I don't think could be further. We're all in this together. We're all trying for the same goal. By 2050, whatever your goals are set, and I'll come on to that shortly. But I think ultimately, we want to give them that choice. Say, use the train. But I think it's making sure that we, as an airline, have all the right information.
Yeah.
That's key, because they need to make the decision. If they fly, if they decide to use EasyJet, I want to make sure they go, well, I understand what I'm doing, understand everything, telling the right story, which I know we will be touching on. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of there is that modal shift. And again, if I go back to the conversation, replay that conversation I was having with the customer recently, on Friday it was, and we were sort of doing a modal shift, and they sort of said, well, we can just do a blanket ban on domestic travel. It's like, well, that doesn't exactly work, because particularly if you're going to Northern Ireland, then you're going to get your feet wet otherwise. You're only going to get so far, you get far as Stranraer. But I think, but it's about making the right choices and really working, with the airline, and hopefully with Gray Dawes as a travel management company, our own account management team, is to actually sort of understand the travel program and actually see where the fat is. And I think also traveling into Europe, you guys have got an extensive European program from intra-Europe. We sometimes forget that. We think of EasyJet as just being from Luton and Gatwick and from our favourite regional airports, but also from a travel program perspective is programming in European rail travel. So actually thinking about what you're doing once you get to the end, and again, we've put a lot of work into that as a business from a booking flow perspective, which we can then bring into the policy around booking European rail through ourselves along the way as well. And I think any policy changes is about communicating to businesses. So a lot of companies, all want to talk about sustainability, but actually, and put it into the travel program, but it's to actually explain to the business, this is what we're doing, this is what our strategy is, and actually being really upfront in acknowledging that a sustainable travel program may cost them a little bit more money to work with the suppliers they want to work with, and to use the aircraft they want to work with, but actually then having that built into the policy, explaining, communicating that to the business. I think you can't really put any sort of more value on that. So I think you obviously sort of explained about the EasyJet offsetting sort of program, which obviously you put into place. That's been hugely successful for yourselves.
Yeah, it's been. I think it was an key announcement that came out. It's proved successful. It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's an enabler, and I'm sure in the audience, people here and people online, it's the split, right? It's everything at the moment seems to be about 50-50. Brexit, no Brexit, mask, no mask, and I think with offsetting too.
Yeah.
But again, it is about understanding what offsetting is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've been lucky enough to speak with a lot of the projects that we offset to, and understand the complexity and the deeper story that goes with that. That not just the sort of planting a tree, or it's in a particular region of Rimbaria, for example, but it's understanding that goes beyond its families that it helps. It's supporting, and I'm a family man, so I kind of see the value. So I think, again, it goes back to, offsetting, understanding where that is, understanding what are the standards that are set, whether it's gold standard, or VCS, verified carbon standard. So these are the kind of things that, the questions that want to be asked by
absolutely.
our customers.
Which I think brings on to our... Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to... No, because then I read about, was it your legacy?
Yep.
Which, we're always interested to hear.
Yeah, sure. I mean, our legacy program we've put together is something that we were actually launched probably a similar time to yourselves back in November 19. Some of the people both here I can see from the audience, but also online probably joined us for that launch event. So legacy is very much around a certified, and I think that's super important that any offsetting that you complete as an organisation is certified. We work with a business called Forest Carbon, and really we're trying to provide our clients with choice. So rather than just sort of saying, you can offset your travel program, it's going to cost you X based on the number of miles, pay some money and then almost forget about it. And you sort of said, really importantly there is about engaging with the program. So legacy is a little bit different, we think, and one of the reasons why sort of been picked up very much within the travel media is a sort of a top 5 sort of program out there, is actually legacy is around providing clients with choice of the type of programs they want to offset to. So we have the sort of the traditional long haul sort of programs, sort of overseas South American sort of programs, which are around forestry planting and reforestation, but also very much bringing it to home. And this was super important for us as a business to actually have something in the UK. So we have programs in the UK which are again new forest planting, but also peatland bog restoration. I spent a bit of time learning about peatland bog. Who knew that would ever going to come up in a job in travel? But peatland bogs is a great carbon store, but actually needs to be managed and looked after, and really providing some money towards those programs, particularly in the Scottish borders and up in sort of Northumbria. So those are available, and then also finally sort of something that's really unique, we think, to Gray Dawes through our ownership, through the Inchcape family who own the business, is actually set aside 500 acres of their own land on the Inchcape estate, which is in the Scottish borders, for a reforestation program. So in my initial novice knowledge was, well, we can put some trees up and then we can provide the opportunity for clients to be able to offset that immediately. Well, of course, a tree takes a while to grow, and actually this is a long-term investment, but we want to give the clients the opportunity, if they wish to invest in that sort of program or any of the UK programs, to be able to go and visit them, to actually go and not quite hug a tree, but almost to get to go and actually have their photo taken with it, and actually know that it's part of their company's program, and we've got some real opportunities to engage in that project over a long term, because this is a long term kind of thing. So it's been gone down really, really well with clients. It's very, very different, but it's a lot more than just the basic offset, and as you rightly said, it's so important to engage with what you're doing, and not just to pay the money to forget about it, but actually to really take it very seriously. And I think, that kind of bringing the story to life kind of thing, I think is important to you. And you sort of, I know that, you try and do different things for different people within the travel procurement process, really.
Yeah, we do. So, I think what sustainability is created in my role,
Yep.
is then really that phrase, expanding your web of influence, when it comes to, we're talking with customers, I think is probably more prevalent than ever. I think when we look at that, we have travel managers, from our side, who need to understand what we're doing and how it will affect and how it might influence their decision around policy. You have a sustainability team within a corporation, and they're maybe more interested in the real kind of what I call the nitty gritty, the detail of what we're doing around how do we calculate carbon emissions, how do we do this? So that's the kind of technical side. So there's been those conversations. And then thirdly, we can look at finance. We mentioned about scope 3s. So, the offsetting, then if you're offsetting, there is a value. And is that then going to be used against scope 3s? That's another discussion. And then we have finally, which I think is key, are the travellers. The travellers are the ones that need to understand the end story. They need to, I think, understand that real kind of, what are you doing? And I go back to what we said earlier about making a right decision. What's the most sustainable way? Yep. Do I understand what they're doing? Yeah, I do. So, my role then, all of a sudden, with this sustainability, it's just created this team then of internal communications, which of course ultimately can only improve things, right? Because relationships grow, you have more contacts, you actually then have an influence. And what we're finding is, sustainability teams are then engaging with travel managers.
Yep.
Not every corporate has travel, all these different sustainability team or ESG, diversity, etc. But what we are, if they do have somebody who has now been told you are going to be operating and looking at sustainability in your role, they're now engaging with travel managers. Yeah. So they're now informing them and saying, oh, did you know? I'm just going. So it can also then increase in terms of demand, in terms of the overall relationship. Yeah. So I've seen that certainly over the last 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. Brilliant.
That's great.
It is about engagement. It's so important.
So.
In everything we do in business travel, it's working together as a tri-partner, really, with the customer, the TMC, and the supplier ultimately, and then making sure they internally explain to everyone. So I think I'm just sort of moving a little bit further forward to the tomorrow and to sort of the medium term. Who knows what tomorrow brings, but I think we've sort of got a little bit of an insight into where some of those sort of areas and direction are going. I know that you've got some sort of medium term sort of aircraft developments. I think you were sort of talking through.
Yeah, no, the medium term. So I think from what we've done today, to give you some idea where it sits, since 2000 we've reduced our carbon emissions by 33%, so a third, through just the sort of normal things that we've been doing. And now it's a case of, well, what is that sort of medium term? And it is then looking at the aircraft in terms, so ordering 56 new Airbus Neos. We've also reordered ones that we ordered 18, upgraded to Airbus A321s. And, ultimately, what does it mean? It's, in an easy way, it's just understanding that they are more fuel efficient, and they're talking about 15% to 25%. So it's even increasing. So, as technology grows, things are becoming more efficient, which ultimately would reduce our fuel. So that's one.
Yeah. And certainly from this topic of fuel, we've sort of had some conversations, and there's a lot in the media about sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF as a sort of little term. For those of you, for my simplest way of explaining it and understanding myself, it's a bit like if you've got a car and you have to put that AdBlue in your car and your fuel. Nobody knows. I'm sure that's just water, but I'm sure it's actually really something. It just feels like expensive water. But sustainable aviation fuel is a little bit like that, isn't it? I think and some airlines and there's talk about that, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I know that from an EasyJet sort of perspective, you've got a particular an understanding of that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Of course. I think that with our announcement is that we will use it at scale.
Yeah.
Really until we can get a fleet which is going to be net zero.
Yeah.
Zero technology, and we'll cover that in the future in a second with the slide. But I think that's the first. We acknowledge that.
Yeah.
It's as and when commercially available. Yeah. Obviously, we used SAF in last year at Gatwick, so we did a mix of SAF. So I think it's something that we, as an airline, we will use. But as and when it comes to...
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a key. I mean, as I sort of said before, I'm no scientist, but like us all can look out the window, and I'm very fortunate, so from my own personal life, to be able to live out in near the countryside. And there's been a real interesting shift, is that a few years ago, to all the fields around by me, we're all sort of growing maize for bio generator, fuel generator. And actually, that's all changed with the things going on in Ukraine towards wheat and barley this year. We're a lot more growing towards crops for people to eat. And one of the challenges we'd spoken about in the past on SAF was obviously it needs to be produced. Some of it is from recycled oils and that sort of thing. But actually, as you rightly pointed out, there's a mass point, a sustainable point. Actually, you can only grow so much of this stuff, and actually, if we also need to balance that with our own food programs with countries as well in a growing population, it's a real challenge. So I think we sort of probably it's a good thing, but maybe it's only a short-term thing. And I think it is about looking at what could be there tomorrow, to tomorrow, but then also be able to think on in very much into the future. So sustainable aviation fuel is one of those things, and I know there's sort of quite a lot of noise around sustainable aviation fuel, but it's a big sort of question of you solve one problem and what else do you create ultimately, I think. And I think probably just from a travel program perspective, so if we go back to the question about maximising travel programs, is where do we go with so the tomorrow piece on that? I think it's also making sure that those programs continue to keep evolving. Your businesses will keep changing and keep doing different things and going different places, making sure that they evolve and actually keep an eye on what the media is doing, or what is supplier base doing, what are EasyJet doing, what are other airlines doing, what are hotels doing, what are car rental companies, and making sure that program is relevant, and to keep communicating to your travellers to what it is that you're to where are they at, to the goals that you've set and the program that you're looking to develop as well. And I think just sort of touching on things we've not really spoken about sort of from a hotel and a conferencing sort of side of things, but making sure that those are included in the travel programs, and there's quite a lot of developments in that particular space at the moment as well, around certification and actually a centralised program for that. Very difficult when it comes to conferencing program. It's a big growth part of this current moment in time. And obviously, we can measure the travel to those, but sometimes to actually the choice of the choice of the destinations that people go to. So very much from your travel program for the tomorrow, it's about education, evolving and changing the program, and keep working with your TMC hopefully on what's happening, and keep the ear to the ground of how the end suppliers and people are approaching this key topic. And I think sort of from that you'd sort of mentioned something about the EasyJet Iris program. Had I seen some information?
Yeah, so that was only announced. It's going to test me. It was announced on the 21st of June. So Iris
Super
program in Muscat and ESAS is a program called Iris, and basically what it means is we'll be the first to trial it. It's working with ATC, air traffic control, so another one about fuel efficiency, operational efficiency, starting in November.
Yep.
We're going to be using 8 of the aircraft, A320neos, and again, it's just as an airline, it's coming up with something else that we can work with. That ultimately, as I said at the start, our first strategy is to minimise carbon.
Yep.
So that will come in line in November. The trial will go on that part, and ultimately reduce our carbon emissions. So that's another partnership that we have.
Brilliant. And then sort of moving perhaps towards the future, for everyone in the room and also on the screen, a funky looking, I think that's a plane, rather than
I, as a bit of a aviation geek, I would say, I love this. Yeah, cool. I don't know why we joked when we spoke, didn't we, Ian, about how come it takes electric cars to now look cool, right? They all look sort of futuristic, and I know why did it take so long, and this is a vision. This is where we as an airline have our long term, as I mentioned earlier, is our strategy. This is a picture that's taken from Wright Electric, who is one of the partners that we work with here in EasyJet. So where does that sit? And we have kind of gone out there. We stick with this. We still think mid-2030s we'll be looking at the first hydrogen propelled aircraft, which will sound very quiet. And I know in the room here maybe we have some volunteers to do the first flight, as and when that'll happen. I don't know if we have to make noise, but this is where the future is. Yeah. What does that mean? Ultimately, in simple terms, we reduce our carbon. And that's where where it sits. And part of this was all about the partnerships. We've signed up to the UN Global Race to Zero by 2050, but we've also just announced again a few weeks ago we're going to be reducing by 35%. That's our commitment by 2035. So having those goals set, the partnerships to get to this stage, they're things like with Airbus. So Airbus is all about, and I love the phrase Zero E. Zero E is again a partnership racing towards looking at the aircraft structure, looking at the technology. So it's partnership now. We signed an MOU back in 2019. Things like Cranfield Aerospace, where we work with. I mentioned Rolls-Royce. Yep. Is another one. GK in aerospace. All these partnerships that we have at EasyJet are ultimately will lead to this. Whether or not it will look exactly like that, I don't quote me, but I think that's where it will lead to. And I think for anyone, for people listening, as big as we are as an airline, as multi-million airline, it is about partnerships. We are never going to get here without partnerships. And I know the word partnerships, we banned it in the corporate world, and what's the strength of partnership? But reality is, without that, we don't get here. So I think if there's a takeaway from it, the one thing I've learned, again, in the team is that these partnerships matter. And every single one of them plays a part in the future of when we're racing to net zero, which, as an industry, we are all doing.
Yeah. And I think, but what is really cool is actually EasyJet are not only just talking about sustainability, but actually putting these partnerships in place and yes. signing partnerships and memorandums of all that kind of thing with key technology providers. And I think the Cranfield, there was I think I saw somewhere there's actually a first, I think it was a hydrogen flight. I can't remember if it was a hydrogen or electric, but first one of these old Trilanders that used to do the sort of the island hops between Jersey and Guernsey. If you've ever done that, that's kind of proper flying seat to hands. But sort of taking some of those and actually using some of this new technology into the future. And it's an exciting time that really the jet engine revolutionised travel in the from the 1940s onwards when it was produced and really into mainstream in the sort of through the 60s and 70s. But I actually think I really genuinely think this is the way that we will end up going in the same way that if we only have to look on the cars on the road, is suddenly the number of electric cars is suddenly massively changing. Now all of those brings new challenges. So for instance, if for a client's travel program that want to talk about car hire, again we speak to clients from their travel program is wanting to put more electric vehicles onto their car hire program, which makes lots and lots of sense. But there's a lot of complexities around that, and there's a lot of unfortunately it's a much higher cost because it's a much higher cost to buy the vehicle in the first place, but also things around how do you charge it, who do you where does the actual car renter charge to charge it, and when it returns, and all those other bits and pieces. So this whole future is really exciting because we all want. I genuinely believe that part of being a human almost is actually meeting people, interacting with people. That's what makes us who we are. I genuinely believe that, and business travel facilitates that and brings businesses together. And I think we've spent the last couple of years not being able to meet each other through COVID, and actually the joy of the business travel show and people in the room today is actually people together in a room and doing that. But in order to do that, we've got to travel, and the only way we can do that and also balance that with the planetary demands and actually looking at the planet and for our own children. Both was talking a little earlier about our children, and actually to invest in these kind of things. But it comes at a cost, and it comes at a change in behaviour. It comes at a change of thinking, and we keep talking about this all morning to death. Really, it comes around putting it into policies, thinking differently, but accepting there's a cost to it. There's a change in the way the working, change of working, the change of preferred airlines for a supplier, change of routing and all those other bits and pieces. But we can get there, and I'm sure we will get there. And I think what I was super excited to obviously invite EasyJet to this genuinely was the fact that you're really making a lot of noise about this, but not just noise for noise sake, but actually putting your money where your mouth is.
No,
and
absolutely.
Get involved in that.
And it's there's a bigger chain. I mean, we announced there. You've probably seen at Bristol Airport partnership, and again, it's not just flying; it's the whole journey throughout. When aircraft comes to stand, looking at solar panel steps, looking at zero E-turn is what the official phrase. So it's those partnerships as well. And go back to what you said about electric cars. I looked at Tesla. Elon Musk, 2008,
Yep.
he produced a Roadster. 2008, 14 years ago. We're thinking mid 2030s, 14 years. I remember when that first came out. Yeah. So in a time scale in your head, it's like, okay, it's not that far.
No, it comes
where this could be. So
yeah. And coming from myself, I come from the home of motor manufacturing in the Midlands, and actually some big massive developments going on in that area around electric batteries and all of those kind of things. But even they themselves have their own environmental challenges to it. So there's no easy answers, everyone, but it is about understanding what part you can play and as individuals at home in our personal lives, but also as corporates and as travellers and as responsible people. So I think really just brings us probably to a sort of final piece is around what would EasyJet like its legacy ultimately to be, in the environmental space? Massive question, but let's see if we can try and wrap it up into that.
It's a good question. I think ultimately legacy for us would be the first zero technology, the first zero flight.
Yeah.
When people look back in years, a bit like Elon Musk, really, who I admire. I think he's, incredible guy. I think it's for us to learn to be the first to operate and to send that flight up with some of the people in the audience here who volunteered. I think that would be our legacy, to say we pioneered it. And I think all throughout, I've been, as I said, 8 years, and we've seen a lot of innovative things that have happened, things that we've done. So this is that would be our legacy.
Yeah, cool.
What about?
I think we've kind of, again, a bit like yourself, covered a lot of what we'd like to be, but I'd really like our teams and to have travel programs for clients that do make a difference from a sustainability sort of perspective, that we can actually be part of that we can use the expertise and the knowledge that we've created from working closely with suppliers, also sharing ideas with other corporate clients of things that work and things that don't work. And again, I'm head of responsible for the account management team, and actually what I love is talking to my team and bouncing off ideas as to what's happened with a particular customer, what another customer's done, and bringing those pieces together. So actually sharing some expertise and working together with customers and with corporates as well. I think probably also the other piece that we're passionate about as a business, we're a 95-year young business, I think to say, but is generally, we've achieved that by continually evolving and continually changing and thinking and being sustainable. But there's also the other sort of side of things is on ESG, which is environmental and social government, but also what can we do from a social perspective? What can we do to invest into the future? We've got a lot of discussion in our own business about investment into the future workforce of the business, and how do we develop that? How do we move that? How do we move those sort of things forward? And so it's kind of it's a massive topic, but it's brilliant, and it's great to see so many people today and so many people online to have joined us to have those particular that have got a passion and interest in it. So very much everyone come and talk to us, come with some ideas, and we haven't got all the answers. None of us have got all the answers, but let's work together to see what we can do on those sort of side of things from there. So I think we've got the opportunity for some questions. So I think hopefully we've got some questions in the audience, and maybe we've also got some questions online.
Ian, I'll kick off with questions if you don't mind. I suppose just from a practical level, if a new client's coming on board with Gray Dawes, what would be maybe the 3 key points if they're really looking at bringing in sustainability into their travel policy? Where would be a good start, really?
Yeah, so for those out to the room, really the question's just around if you're a new customer, what sort of 3 steps would you want to take from a sort of a travel programme? I can answer that in a moment. Is there anything from your perspective that you wanted to add?
You go first.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. So I think really, firstly, as we sort of said before, is reviewing ultimately what's your business objectives. What are you trying to achieve? Because they will be different for every business. So first of all, you can't make a change, you can't develop a program, you can't understand a customer unless you understand what it is that you're looking to achieve. So firstly is understanding, I think, what you're looking to achieve. I think the second thing is to actually engage. Both, as we sort of said before, from a TMC, from a supplier perspective, but also within your own business, to actually see who are the stakeholders within the business, what's business, everyone's opinions, what do people need, why do you travel, how do you travel, and I think then the third thing really is to work on that sort of policy, to look at what that policy does that goes beyond just measuring carbon. We're not sick and tired of talking to clients about measuring carbon, but actually is to not only to measure it, but actually to do something with that and make a difference with that. I think that'd be the three sort of things from myself. I'm not sure if there's anything to add.
I guess from an airline perspective, data, really getting the data, challenging the supplier, getting that from our side would be, asking what, and also, it's all about getting data, but what is it you need? What's the goal to achieve? And that's working with us, we would support, and I know you said that in earlier, but yeah, I think that would be from an airline's perspective. And then, again, the story to life piece, kind of use this a lot, I think, this year, but bringing the story to life for them. So where does it impact? What can we do to help that? Whether it's simplistic terms, whatever that might be. So I think data and then the story that would sit and resonate to help ultimately, if there's a change in policy, helps with their decision to who they want to travel with.
Excellent.
Let's hear from the online audience. How are you finding the supply chain in providing carbon data beyond the aviation fuel expended? For example, food that can be included in carbon calculations.
We can. That's a good question. That's something we looked at, and I mentioned about in-flight operations that we have. One area, obviously, then kerosene or fuel getting to aircraft. The whole supply chain. It's a challenge. I think. We look at sustainability with. I didn't want to say the word COVID, but I have to. With the COVID, the pandemic, sustainability has grown exponential. So I think everybody wants to know from everyone. What are you doing? What's going on? What are you doing? And I think it's kind of, a lot of them are catching up, but I think it's key as a supplier, as anybody, to question what they're doing, and ultimately what it is that their objectives are. So what's their short, medium and long-term plan? I think you can tell a lot from that, and I think it's something that we've done. We recently changed suppliers, I mentioned, of our food on board and beverage. So, and that's on a base that's been around. The first question is around, okay, so what are you doing on plastics? What are you doing around to reduce your carbon? So challenge, question. This will evolve, I think. I think the more that we get asked the questions, they'll have more of an easier answer, I guess. But that's something that's, it's a challenge, but it's something that you have to go through. Yeah. Because ultimately, again, it goes back to it. It's all about in it together to reduce them, to get to net zero.
Absolutely. And I think, whilst the question is specifically a little bit outside of fuel, but we've worked with a client recently to bring in well-to-tank calculations, so you can then sort of go that little bit extra beyond just what you've emitted, but also how you get the items, how you get the fuel to the actual, what the carbon impact of getting the fuel out of the ground is, and offsetting those sort of pieces, and understanding those sort of pieces. But I think is also, as you say, is working with sustainable suppliers, and obviously with I know it's a little bit difficult for an airline, but with local suppliers and yes, there are calculations. Pretty much the DEFRA calculations have calculations on all sorts of things outside of travel, but are still relevant potentially to pieces within travel. But as I sort of mentioned before, some of the other sort of supply chain sort of side of things, and the hotel and conferencing is quite difficult to sort of find a single program and a single piece. But I'm sure that will come, and that is very much where we're, everybody's pushing.
Yeah, of course. And this is the reason we're here today, right? Yeah. We're having a discussion. Yep. We're just having a chat about it, and hopefully people will go away with either questions or ideas or things that they've learned. One takeaway, two takeaways. Yep. That's what this is. We even more, I hope. But hope we get loads of questions after. But yeah, this is what it's about. Yeah, having that discussion.
Yeah, cool. I don't see any other question. We've got one more question.
I fear this one.
Hello. For obvious reasons, obviously, air travel takes the headlines in regards to sustainability. But where do you kind of see the future of hotels in that conversation?
Yeah, and I think currently the current DEFRA calculations, and sorry, keep going back to that, but are very linear in terms of if the hotel is in. The hotel is in Birmingham. It's the Premier Inn, for instance, is going to emit the same amount of carbon as the Holiday Inn. They may do, who knows? But I think actually to program, and certainly I know that our colleagues in the conference space in particular are looking at and receiving RFPs and for proposals from clients that actually want to have conferences in particular locations where you could perhaps go and actually choose your venue based on the sustainability. So include that as part of your actual conferencing sort of questions around, where are you getting your food and drink from, and how are you supporting your local community beyond just carbon, but actually the whole how that supply chain actually how that business and organisation supports local business. I know there's a few hotels in London that have set up that have been social enterprises and actually supports people coming out of prison and young people and those sort of things. They're kind of great organisations. Obviously, the standard of the hotels has a few moments, but I think I'd like to see more of those sort of things. But you can consider those, and you can bring those into travel programme beyond just hotels, but also to really think about what's the impact of that business and how does that business support the local community and the local people and the local suppliers, and beyond just how much how thick are the walls and how well insulated the windows. Excellent. So I think that's really it. I wanted to sort of thank everyone's time. We've obviously covered a huge amount. Thank you particularly for Mark's time and for joining us. Been super helpful, and I hope everybody, both here and also online, has found that super useful. We will put the video of this and various snippets online, and we'll be communicating that from a Gray Dawes, both on social media, but also through email channel and through account management team. So for existing clients, come talk to your account manager with some ideas. We're putting together some sort of hint sheets and sort of tips on some of the big picture topic items. Obviously, talk to EasyJet. I'm sure in business development you'd love to talk to customers.
Please do.
Come and find us.
Very happy to talk.
So there's quite a lot to unpack, but it is available. There are information there, and we will continue to sort of keep coming back to this topic. I think it's so big and so important. We do finally a little sort of final plug really within our Travel Talks program. The next one comes up on the 1st of September, which is all about controlling the costs of your travel program. We'll be sending information out on that, and really who will be involved in that. But super important topic. But thank you everyone for all of your time, both in person and also online. And have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.